Picture Leon, a quiet man in a long coat, a plant under his arm, a rifle in his bag. He moves through New York like a ghost. He takes contracts. He eliminates targets. He feels nothing until he does. And that tension, that contradiction is exactly what made the film unforgettable. Then came John Wick, a man who kills 70 people in a single night with a pencil, who operates inside a secret economy of gold coins and luxury hotels reserved exclusively for assassins. Then Agent 47, bald, suited, a barcode on the back of his neck, moving through crowds like a machine that happens to look human. These are the hitmen your brain has been trained to imagine. Elegant, precise, almost artistic. The real answer is far stranger than any of that, because when you actually look at the documented reality of people who kill for money or for orders, two very different worlds emerge, and neither of them looks anything like the movies. The first world is the one most people never think about. It is legal, it is institutional, it has a chain of command, a budget, approval processes, and paperwork. It is called a state. Every major government on Earth employs people whose designated function is to eliminate human targets. They have different names depending on the country and the agency. Special forces operators, intelligence field officers, drone strike coordinators. But the job description, stripped of its official language, is the same. You identify a target. You are authorized to kill them. You do it. The Mossad, Israeli intelligence, ran one of the most documented state assassination programs in history. After the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre, in which 11 Israeli athletes were killed by a Palestinian militant group, the Israeli government launched Operation Wrath of God. For years, Mossad agents tracked down the planners and organizers of the attack across Europe and the Middle East and eliminated them one by one. Some operations took months of surveillance before a single action. Agents lived under false identities in foreign cities waiting. The actual moment of killing was often seconds. The preparation was endless. This is the bureaucratic reality that no film shows you. The waiting, the surveillance, the reports filed, the authorizations requested, the meetings. One former CIA officer described the process of approving a targeted elimination as resembling, in his words, a particularly slow legal proceeding. Lawyers involved, ethics boards consulted, memos written in triplicate, and then there are the drone operators, men and women who sit in climate-controlled facilities in Nevada or Virginia, looking at screens, and who guide missiles into buildings on the other side of the planet. They watch the target, they watch the strike, they watch the aftermath, and then their shift ends, they drive home, they pick up their children from school, they have dinner. Researchers studying this specific population have documented extraordinarily high rates of psychological trauma, not because these operators doubt the legitimacy of their missions, but because the human brain was not designed to process lethal violence from a distance of 7,000 miles and then immediately re-enter domestic life. The disconnection between the two realities creates a fracture that does not heal easily. Several former operators have described being unable to sit through a family dinner without their hands shaking. That is the legal hitman. Authorized, institutional, deeply human in his damage. The second world is the one the films actually depict, even if they get it completely wrong. Richard Kuklinski was a contract killer who worked for the Gambino and De Cavalcante crime families in New Jersey from the 1950s through the 1980s. He is believed to have been responsible for over 100 deaths, though the exact number was never confirmed. Before his arrest in 1986, he lived in a quiet suburb. He had a wife, 3 children, a house with a lawn. His neighbors described him as a normal family man. In prison, he gave a series of recorded interviews that became some of the most studied documents in forensic psychology. What struck researchers was not what Kuklinski said about the killings, it was what he did not say. There was no remorse, no excitement, no pride, no regret. He described the act of killing with the same emotional register that most people use to describe a commute to work. It was a thing that needed to be done. He did it. He went home. Forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz, who studied Kuklinski extensively, described him as a textbook case of severe antisocial personality with psychopathic features. The critical distinction, Dietz noted, was that Kuklinski did not enjoy killing. He was not sadistic. He was simply indifferent. The absence of normal human empathic response meant that taking a life registered as no more significant than any other task. This is almost the exact opposite of what Anton Chigurh represents in No Country for Old Men, a killer with a philosophy, a code, almost a religion around death, or what Villanelle represents in Killing Eve, someone who finds genuine pleasure in the act. These characters are dramatically compelling precisely because they feel something. The documented reality is far more disturbing because of what is absent. Now consider the economics of the clandestine world. Because the image of the high-paid professional, like Agent 47, with his continental account and his global reputation, does not survive contact with actual data. Researchers who have studied criminal court cases involving contracted killings have found that the sums involved are almost always far lower than popular imagination suggests. Academic studies of prosecuted murder-for-hire cases in the United States found median payments ranging from a few hundred to a few $1,000s. Not millions, not gold coins, a few $1,000s, sometimes less. One documented case involved a payment of $500 and a used television set. The professional independent contractor, someone with no organizational affiliation who takes anonymous contracts from strangers, is largely a fictional construct. In reality, contracted killings almost always involve people who already know each other. A criminal organization using a trusted associate. A family dispute that escalates. The cold, anonymous professional of the films simply does not appear in the court record with any frequency. And then there is the dark web, which has created an entire economy built almost entirely on the fantasy. Since at least 2010, researchers and law enforcement have documented hundreds of websites advertising assassination services for hire. Academic studies of these sites, including research published by criminologist Thomas Holt, found that the overwhelming majority were fraudulent. Someone pays, the money disappears, nothing happens. The customer cannot exactly file a complaint. In several documented cases, people who attempted to hire through these channels were arrested, not because the hitman turned them in, but because law enforcement had already infiltrated the site. The fake hitman economy is, in a dark way, one of the most effective crime deterrents that exists. People pay for something that does not work and then get arrested in the process. So here is what you are left with when you strip away Leon and John Wick and Agent 47. On one side, state-sanctioned operators who follow legal chains of command, file paperwork, and come home with invisible damage that does not go away. On the other, a criminal world where the glamorous professional is mostly a myth, where the actual work is sordid and low-paid and organizationally mundane, and where the internet version is almost always a scam. The gap between the fantasy and the reality is not a gap in the violence, it is a gap in the meaning. The films give the killing weight, ceremony, moral complexity, a code. The documented reality offers none of that, just paperwork on one side and indifference on the other, which raises one uncomfortable question. We have produced Leon and John Wick and Agent 47 and Killing Eve and 50 years of Hitman mythology in film and television and games. We keep returning to this fantasy of the elegant, purposeful killer. What does it say about us that we find that so compelling? Maybe the answer is simpler than it seems. In a world that feels chaotic and out of control, the Hitman fantasy offers something seductive. The idea that violence can be clean, precise, consequence-free. That a problem can be permanently solved by someone who knows exactly what they are doing. The reality, as always, is messier. The hands shake at dinner. The money disappears. The target was someone's father. But the fantasy is so much more comfortable, and so we keep watching.